Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Today I'm going to be discussing not Dragonlance, but rather Forgotten Realms. Now I don't know much about this world, but I figured I'd take another whack at it, so to speak. Since it's Dragon Month, I figured I'd start this video off by discussing Tiamat's origin story, or at least one of them. That according to the ancient draconic myth, Elegy for the First World in Forgotten Realms. According to it, at the beginning of time, Bahamut and Tiamat awakened from the primeval chaos, and they partnered together to try to create the world. The world was known as the Prime Material Plane at the beginning. They ended up creating together the dragon god Sardior to help them in the creation of the rest of dragonkind, with the first metallic and chromatic dragons created. If this sounds at all similar to Dragonlance in regards to how their dragons operate with metallic and chromatic dragons, that's because Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms, this idea was one spawned the other to an extent. That said, there are massive differences between Takesis and Tiamat, but there are certainly some similarities. It's said that when the gods of the Outer Planes ended up invading the First World, Tiamat resisted and opposed them, even after Bahamut was defeated. She was eventually beaten by the combined might of the gods and sealed away in a prison of sorts of darkness. Clearly, this is derived from the idea of beyond the doors of night from Tolkien's mythology, with how Melkor was eventually sealed off beyond the doors of night. The story doesn't end there, though, for Tiamat. A myth spread by giants, the 1,000-Year War ended as a result of a curse that struck Tiamat after she slew an unknown giant deity. She was doomed to become a prisoner in her lair in Avernus, and was only able to leave the plane if summoned by some big ritual. That said, others state she was just imprisoned in the 9, underworlds. Once dragons as a race had established themselves during the time of dragons era of Forgotten Realms, apparently various religious factions of dragons began to battle one another over their different ideologies. Religious fervor waning over time as dragon philosophers came to the conclusion that gods who allowed such behavior were not worthy of their worship. This started the draconic apathy towards their gods, which lasted for several thousands of years, with the hatred that Tiamat and Bahamut and their followers shared between themselves much too strong for any philosophers to dissuade them of. The conflict eventually came to be known as the Dragonfall War, with Tiamat breeding some ancient draconic creatures known as the Spawn of Tiamat, and she attempted to wipe out all the followers of Bahamut. Eventually, the war waned as the Untheric Empire began, and somehow their pantheon became prominent. It's not clear to me how that works, but apparently the gods gain in power regarding how many prayers they have. It's not clear to me. That said, Tiamat became one of their deities by using a three-headed aspect, and she ended up somehow, the plane upon which those gods existed upon worsened the worst aspects of her nature, making her somehow she became too powerful for the other gods, with Bahamut taking up the guise of Marduk, and him gaining the upper hand at this time with the help of these new gods. And this led ultimately to the Orc-Gate Wars, and to her now turning to Asmodeus, who made her an archfiend. So yeah, this is so far what I've been able to determine regarding Tiamat's early history. If it at all sounds confusing because of gods increasing with power because of worship, or somehow becoming more powerful when they join a club, I don't fully get it. I'm not gonna lie. But we have to bear in mind the basis for Tiamat is an ancient Babylonian demon of sorts, with Marduk being the first king of the gods who ended up throwing her down and claiming the kingship of the gods in a myth that's very similar to the Zeus and Kronos myth. That said, next time I'll detail the events of the Rise of the Dragon Queen, I think it's called. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button.